America. He's joining us for the newspapers. Lauren, starting off with Angela Merkel. Her decision to reverse that planned Easter lockdown, sparking a lot of reaction in the press, Lauren.
Indeed, Stuart. And well, it's quite unusual for Merkel, who's long been seen as a model of stability in Europe regarding the pandemic, to backtrack in such a way. And it's sparking a lot of reactions in the German papers, starting with the Tagesspiegel, which shows the Chancellor standing alone on stage, saying, "This mistake is my mistake and my mistake only," a way to showcase her decision to shoulder full responsibility for this U-turn. And now it's also worth noting, looking at this picture, that this wide frame and Angela Merkel alone in the center implies she's cutting an increasingly isolated figure in the German political landscape. Moving on to another German paper, Bild, which has traditionally been quite critical of the government's handling of the pandemic, but argues this time that the decision to reverse the Easter lockdown was the correct one, albeit a difficult move for Merkel as it makes her appear weak and undecisive. Bild urges the German population to respect this decision, which ultimately puts the country before her own public image. But it does, however, call on Merkel to change her methods in the future, and to be more transparent in communicating and announcing these measures, the only way, according to the newspaper, to gain the trust of the German population.
Let's move to the UK for this next story. The newspaper The Guardian, they've published an exclusive investigation. Now, this is on racial discrimination in schools.
Well, that's right. It's quite a big investigation by The Guardian. Journalists there have been crunching the numbers and published their findings in this long-form investigation, and their conclusions are quite unsettling, Stuart. As we can see on the front page, The Guardian found that exclusion rates are up to 6 times higher for Black and Caribbean pupils in English schools and up to 8 times for Roma and Gypsy children. Now, the paper calls this a terrible injustice, of course, and points to experts warning these exclusions are likely to criminalize children who do not have the resources to buffer against the dangers of being out of school. The study, however, does note that a majority of schools do excellent work in supporting these children, and that only 10% of British schools are responsible for 90% of all exclusions. The Guardian also talked to several students, mostly Black and mixed-race students, about their experiences of discrimination in school, and some testimonies are quite harrowing, with pupils reporting daily harassment, mockeries, and so forth by students or teachers, starting as early as the 3rd grade. And most important, there seems to be an unwillingness to intervene on behalf of school authorities there, which often leaves the victims with a sense of guilt, somehow blaming themselves for this harassment.
Yeah, such a terrible story needs to be tackled, doesn't it? Let's move to Lebanon for this next story. Love this story. It's an unusual story of sibling rivalry, which has led to the construction of the country's skinniest building.
That's right, an unusual story, especially for Lebanon, which we talk about a lot in terms of war or conflict or poverty, but there's other areas where the Lebanese can excel, and brotherly spite is one of them, as we can see by this with this article by Insider. It's the story of Beirut's skinniest building, which is only 2 feet wide at its narrowest point, that's 60 centimeters, and 14 feet at its widest. It was built in the 1950s by a man whose sole purpose was to ruin his brother's seafront view.
Such a good story. Yeah.
It all started with an inheritance dispute, as you can imagine. There was a plot of land. One of the brothers got the better plot. The other one decided to build this essentially a glorified wall just out of spite, simply to block the view. Or as the paper puts it, turning pettiness into an extreme sport. But that's not all. The Independent tells us that this building has now become one of the most valued pieces of real estate in Beirut. A building aptly nicknamed the Grudge is, well, of course, standing right on the seafront. Who would want to live inside this wall? This beautiful pink wall. And however, the article tells us that nobody knows who owns the building right now, meaning it's likely to keep grudgingly standing there for years to come.
I suppose you could just about have a fold-down bed if you were lucky. We're going to head to Iceland for the last story. This is not one of rivalry, but of conviviality, if I can say it, and sharing, in fact.
Well, that's right. And, well, the title really says it all for this one. As website IFL Science reports, scientists who were studying a volcanic eruption person in Iceland basically decided to throw a sausage grilling party using the volcano as a barbecue. Now we can see in this video that they didn't even bother to use a grill. They simply threw the sausages, the hot dogs, directly onto the lava and the buns as well. However, the experiment doesn't seem to have any scientific value whatsoever. We don't even know how the sausages tasted, which according to the article, probably not very good, as volcanic eruptions are known to have a strong stench of sulfur, which is not very tasty.
No, it's a strong sense of sulfur and of tomato ketchup, judging by those images.
You never know. I'm sure they had it with them.
Very nice. Yeah. Thank you very much. I love that story too. Lauren Bayer-Stecker, thanks very much with the papers.